This is the Subvert. I'm Alex Knight, joined by Aaron Stewart.
Hello.
And Kristin Rumohr.
Hey.
Thanks very much for joining. This is the podcast where we embark on a weekly basis on a smattering of different subjects, from neuroscience to economics to current events, anything that we find fascinating and that we very likely don't know that much about, but that's part of the reason why we get together every week, is to talk about this stuff and maybe make ourselves a little less dumb, as Aaron likes to say. Right, Aaron?
What? Where? What? Who's dumb?
Exactly. So phobias.
Right.
Everybody's got them, right?
Yeah.
Do you
For
have a
sure.
phobia that you would like to share? I have a phobia. Maybe more
Go
than
on,
one. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Is Alex's phobia? Awesome. Good. Okay, tell me, because this
I feel
will
like
be
he's
good.
trying to get a free therapy.
This will be
session
ammunition
again.
here. Okay, let me know. Come on.
I might be trying to get a free therapy session. That's true. That's very true.
I thought
Yeah.
that was literally all this
Seems
was.
like reoccurring nightmares.
Yeah. I got to try,
This is
right?
why
I mean,
we
you can't
had
blame a
Kristen,
guy
the
for
master,
trying.
Here to help me figure out what the hell is wrong with our brains.
So why are we talking about phobias exactly? Why do we need to? Is this a group therapy session? Is that what this is going to be? Hopefully that we are, like, what's the end goal? Are we eliminating the phobia at the end?
Well, that's a question for Kristen, actually. Like, are phobias helpful for us in any way?
I mean, evolutionary, of course they are, right? That's why they develop, right? We need to be fearful of certain things. So back when we're living in the forest, we should probably be afraid of poisonous spiders. Right?
But like
Yeah.
the uncontrollable fear of things, that's the part. Like, this is where a phobia becomes more than just that's a real fear, right?
Yes.
Like, you leave the cave, you might get eaten by something. That's a real fear. That's not necessarily a phobia. A phobia is that unconscious, like the inability to control that kind of fear. That's where phobia becomes a thing, right? So is
think
that
phobias
kind of fear
Phobias
helpful?
are more like a faulty perception, right? Well, you're saying, like, fear is very, very real and very necessary for certain things. But then phobias, people can be afraid of all sorts of absolute nonsense, right? It doesn't make sense,
Yes, exactly.
right? Like, someone's terrified of teddy bears. What? Like, where does that come from? So I think it's
Yeah.
a faulty perception where we attach some sort of negative meaning to sometimes, harmful things, but a lot of times totally harmless.
I want to dig deeper into that. Where do phobias come from? Because sometimes, obviously, they are obvious. Maybe there's some kind of childhood trauma, something that happens to you. But like in my case, for me, I'm almost embarrassed to say, but I have a thing with earwax, and I'm not entirely certain where that came from.
You do have a thing with earwax.
It really bothers me. Just the idea.
You're very
Yeah,
neurotic
we
about
were
how
gonna
we
say,
clean our
it
earphones
leaks-
after.
It
Right.
leaks down the side of your neck, and it gets a little.
Ugh,
You get these little
just the
stains
idea-
on your shirts. There, you gotta really.
Your earwax leaks out your ear?
No, I was talking. That was Alex's problem with earwax, was that it's constantly leaking out of his.
There was one time. And this is actually
okay, cool.
probably where it came. So I'll tell you a little story here. So one time when I was a kid, I'll never forget this, but I had woken up in the morning and I got up. I feel something weird, like in my ear. It felt like there was an object in there, and I thought it was a bug. So I'm freaking out, arms flailing, smacking my ear, trying to get this thing out. And when I look at what had fallen out of my ear, it was a chunk of earwax that had clearly been impacted and in there for God knows how long. And it was the size of a dime. I'm not even kidding.
Wow.
Yeah. And from
Is it
that
weird
point
that I
on,
find that, like, that'd be so satisfying?
it was satisfying in a weird way, but it's like I think about it all the time. Since then, it's always on my mind. Earwax. I can't get it out. I don't know what to do about it.
That was.
So then question, do you use
freaked me out.
Q-tips?
Well, I for many years I have, and I still do once in a while, but I know they're not really good for you either.
No, they're not good at all. That's
Right?
exactly
So I've
why we
tried.
probably had that.
I should probably do some kind of like an irrigation thing. I know there are different solutions. You can You can get kits from a drugstore. Just I think you just put water in there or something like that. But
actually, what my doctor recommends is do nothing.
Do nothing because it's self-cleaning. That's what I hear.
It's just
is that
like
true?
your nose.
Yeah,
exactly. That's the thing. Like every time because it's connected to the same pathway as your nose here, and it all just leaks through. And it's actually meant to lubricate, and it's supposed to flow. And that's where adding stuff to it and lubricate and all this, isn't helping. Yeah. So basically, we're supposed to just leave it alone. My son had actually, when he grew his hair out long, he actually got impacted where he couldn't hear anything out of his ear.
Oh, that's not good.
And the doctor did a warm wash on it. That was one of the most disgusting things I've seen in my life. Right? You talk about a chunk of wax the size of a dime, man. He had, it was, and
what doesn't help? I'm scrolling through as Instagram has ads, and I'm scrolling through, and this ad is now started to pop up recently, and it's a product that you can buy that's like an endoscope that you shove into that's got a camera. And you shove it into your ear so you can actually remove wax. And that added in and of itself is horrifying.
Well, you can shove it in all
stuff
sorts of
that
places,
can come out of your
ear too, I guess.
What was that? Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I said you could put it in all sorts of things. You could start with your ear if you really wanted to, I guess. But
we're not even going to go there. But
oh, come on.
Okay,
so talk endoscope. I mean,
so I've shared my story about earwax. I want to know either of you. There must be some kind of phobia, no matter how small. I'm sure you have something
got a super embarrassing one as well. Your earwax one at least kind of makes sense. I can see why that would be troublesome after, but I'm terrified of starfish.
Oh, okay. Do tell.
Like the most harmless, well, to us anyway. Terrified of them.
Really?
I think I saw a video once about like if you speed up like fast motion, they're actually vicious.
Yeah.
And like they extend their stomachs to eat. So it just drops out and then their stomach just engulfs whatever it is and they just eat it whole.
Is that starfish or something else?
Starfish.
Is it?
It is.
Okay, now you're going to get me freaking out about
then
starfish.
I would just be erroneously scared of starfish, but yeah, terrified. If I see them just hanging out on the dock, I will scream and run the other way.
Now, is that also because
we don't have a lot of starfish around here, do we? Or is
that because they stick on things?
I haven't actually been down there.
Yeah, they hang out all the time. A seagull picked one up and was eating it the other day, and I was cheering on the seagull. Everyone else like, oh, this poor starfish. I'm like, yeah, get it.
You're not going to spit your stomach out on me.
It is one of my fears. I have nightmares about this happening. If I'm paralyzed on the beach and the starfish just slowly, I mean, it'll take like 3 years to get over to me, but and then it just...
Did you ever have a bad experience with one? Did one ever latch on to you?
A completely unfounded fear.
Really? Huh.
Did you watch like a video of one spitting its stomach out and that made you...
I think it must have been. Like the aquarium has the, you can do the fast motion, right? They've got the camera on the starfish and then you can speed up and do the fast motion and it just desiccated this bed of clams or whatever it was. It was just carnage.
Decimated.
See, I learned something new today because I had no idea. First of all, I've never seen that footage. Second of all, I had no idea that they could be vicious because they seem so harmless. And I always thought they were kind of pretty to look at.
Ugh. Everything's got to eat something.
That and you can cut off its arm and it grows back. What kind of
that's miraculous. Thing, right? That's amazing.
Well, they've actually just shown that alligators or crocodiles, one of the two, can regrow their tails.
Yeah, crazy.
See,
just
we
like
need
salamanders. Well, not quite like salamanders, but
we need to figure out how they do that so that that human beings can regrow limbs. Like, isn't that being researched?
I don't know if those two things, just because we can figure it out, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be possible for us to do it, but...
Well, this is why we should be looking into it.
If you want to be lizard Alex.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. We'll volunteer him without his knowledge. Yeah.
What about you, Aaron?
Why are you cutting off my arm?
What do you dread?
As a kid, it was always the spiders. That was the main...
Yeah, well, that's pretty common.
It was just the fangs. Just,
Yeah.
Like you had that image of the fangs going into, and that was always just,
Yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you.
I used to, I don't know when the turning point was, but for the longest time, even into my 20s, I was always deathly afraid of spiders. And it started when, as a kid, when Arachnophobia, that movie came out with John Goodman. That movie gave me nightmares. I could not sleep for weeks after that. And I always was scared of spiders. And at some point, maybe I matured or something, but I actually grew to respect spiders and all insects. And I now will try to avoid killing them. Like if I see a spider in my house, I'll actually put it in a cup and I'll set it outside. I'll set it loose. Whereas I know a lot of people will just squash them, but they also serve a purpose in nature, right?
Oh yeah, leave the spiders alone because they eat all the other bugs that come into your house.
Yeah, you get moths, right? You always get moths coming in your house and eating clothes, and I'm sure spiders probably eat those.
Yeah,
probably.
They'll eat anything. It's when the spider moves. Like, I'm okay with it if he's hanging out in the corner. We'll make friends. I'll name it, right? And be like, oh, good morning, Bill. What's going on? And then 2 weeks later, Bill's nowhere to be found, right? Then I get a bit scared. I'm like, where'd you go?
Uh-huh. Where, what are you doing? What you doing?
It was all cool when you just stuck to your corner.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the problem. If there's one that you can see, there's 100 that you can't.
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you a great story if you've got a fear of spiders.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually my sister's story.
Can we have the little violins plinking in the background?
So it's my sister's story in her old apartment. Sitting there on the couch, just hanging out, and there's kind of this speck on the wall. And just kind of started moving, right? I was like, oh, that's weird. A piece of dust, maybe? Is there a breeze coming through? It just, something didn't seem right about it until all of a sudden, this speck of dust breaks open and thousands of spiders come pouring out of it. Oh
my God.
The wall is just covered, right? So it must have been just an egg sack, right? And there's literally thousands in there. And she's sitting there just going, I have to move. Right?
Yeah.
Like there's no way I can ever find all of these spiders.
No, they're everywhere now.
That's an arachnophobic's worst nightmare.
I will tell you, and very similar to that story, I lived in this old building in Vancouver once that had an issue with cockroaches. And I remember one day I walked into the kitchen, I opened the cupboard to grab some Oreos, and they must have been breeding. I don't know where they were coming from, but I opened the cupboard and I
like Oreos,
screamed. There were hundreds of cockroaches in the cupboard, clearly
it was
eating
the fact
the
that
food.
You had eaten 3 of them already. That was the
deal. Yeah, no.
Oh, they taste like Oreos. No.
The moment that happened, I said, okay, yeah, we're packing our bags. We are moving out of this building.
Yeah,
I don't care about getting the security deposit back. We're moving out of here. We're going to figure this out because at that point I knew the building had some serious problems.
Yeah. When the roaches claim your security deposit, yes, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Now I can just picture all these roaches blinged out on the
exactly right. With like the dollar gold chain. Yeah.
Yep.
Kristen, help us out with some coping mechanisms. How do you deal with a phobia?
There's a lot of different ways, like kind of behavioral therapy is a very popular one where it's actually just slow exposure to the phobia, right? Because you need to kind of rewire your brain into thinking that whatever this thing isn't posing a threat to me, right? So that's arguably, I'd say, the most effective way is small doses, right? So you can start off just maybe watching a film, right? Increasing that, or start looking at a picture. I guess that's a little bit more innocent. Upgrade to a film, upgrade to, whatever it is in a contained environment.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So does that work for like pretty literally any fear-based syndrome or? I
would think if it's something that's actually, tangible, it could work, right? If we're talking about, well, I don't know.
Pretty much any like heights.
Maybe not so much, but.
Yeah. See, that was like, I used to have a fear of heights. That used to be a problem for me, right? Like getting up to the edge of something, even if there was glass or something in the way, was just that, right? But I did enough high-rise work that now I'm pretty comfortable up there. So I think that might be just, that's where I was kind of cueing in on, any of these fear-based issues that we've been, having moving forward here might be just an exposure issue, right? Where it's just a matter of starting small, and like they're even finding that you can fix peanut allergy by just giving very small pieces of peanut, right, to kids. So maybe most of what we're maybe that's an allegory for most of what we're experiencing in the world nowadays is just a little bit of exposure to some of these things might.
We are quite sheltered, living in Western culture. We're not going to be exposed to a lot of these things that we are frightened of. So that does make sense.
Not too many giant tarantulas in my house, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I did have a fear for a while. I think I heard, it must have been a myth or an old wives' tale, but I heard a myth that tarantulas would travel in bananas.
Yes.
So for the longest time, still sometimes it pops into my head that if I peel a banana, a tarantula is going to jump out at me.
We get the ones from Costco that are in a bag. Those I always have to kind of, look and just do the no, nobody's in there. Okay, I think I'm good. Just to be sure.
Oh, right? Just a quick question on the spider thing with the bananas. Did you say that was a myth? I just want to make sure.
That's true.
It might be true.
It is true. It is true.
Is it?
Because it's
the amount of time that they're transported.
But that's where, if you think about it, it's any kind of nookie, kind of little hidey place that they can get into, right? Of course, they'd hide up in there. And it's not like even if they give them a shake, there's still probably going to be some sort of, right?
I take it all back. I thought this episode was going to be a therapy session, because I'm thinking by the time this episode ends, I'm going to be more scared. You're just adding phobias.
Again, it's about exposure, right? So it's about little tiny, right? Like,
That's what friendship's all about, right? Share the fears, share the load.
Exactly. And that's where, we understand that we all have these little irrational parts of our brain that just go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? And it's okay. Once we share them, right? Like, we can help each other to get over it a little bit and go, okay, it's just, and that's where one of the things that got me over spiders was there's a photographer that does pictures of, very bright little colorful spiders. And there's a whole bunch of them that are actually quite cute when you get them under, a macro lens and make them look right. And so a lot of that helps when you don't have to picture them as these big beasts with gigantic fangs, right? It's a little easier to humanize them, I suppose. Or
what do you think of the idea that we're supposed to eat, 5 or 6 spiders throughout our lifetime?
Yep. Oh, I thought it was like in a month kind of thing.
That's just my protein every day.
Constant spiders crawling into it. That's why I make a point of.
But can you imagine waking up, right?
God.
Like mid-eat, like.
I was going to eat dinner after this, but.
Crunch, 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 crunch. That's not supposed to. What? Crunch, crunch. Yeah, and you wouldn't know until never, basically, right?
Lovely.
Yay.
That's lovely. Any other phobias that you want to share? What about ones that any strange
Shitty
ones
drivers?
strange ones that pop out from people you've met where you're like, whoa, that's a weird thing to be concerned about?
Realistically, any of them, like the ones that, peanut butter stuck to the roof of your mouth. That's a fear.
Okay, that's weird.
I mean, it's not pleasant.
Understandable.
No, it's not.
Right?
But
like,
right.
But afraid of that, so you would just avoid peanut butter entirely because it might stick to the roof of your mouth. I just okay, sure, all right. And again, it seems like a lot of these things would be just a simple exposure thing where just like take a little bit of peanut butter and just stick it to the right. It's okay. It's fine for it to stick there. It's not going to dissolve the roof of your mouth. It's fine. Right.
We make fun of a lot of these types of phobias, but there are some that are debilitating to people where it starts impacting their life, right? I mean, this is a fictional example. I don't know if either of you have seen Better Call Saul, but Saul's brother, who he's always wrapping himself in space blankets because he's afraid of like electromagnetic interference, that it causes him physical pain. Like if he walks into a room and he knows somebody's cell phone is on, it causes him physical pain.
And see, that's why I wanted to start with what's the actual therapy on this, right? And I kind of hope that a bit of the laugh therapy might be part of what helps us to get through this too, right?
Yeah.
But
The laugh therapy.
Kristen, again, kind of the shared experience, right? And the, you know that's absurd, right? Like, you know, that what I'm afraid of is absurd as well, and that if by sharing these absurdities inside our head, hopefully we can make it less of a thing for you when we might be able to move beyond.
I'd say it's normalizing instead of, because that's a bit shaming, isn't it? To be like, that's ridiculous that you think that way.
But it's more the fact that our brains just do this to us.
Yeah.
Right. Like the problem is not that you're, you know, weak or anything like that. The problem is that our brains are wired to do this shit to us if we're not aware, and sometimes even if we're aware that it's happening.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's more a matter of, like, again, I assume that we're all fucked up. Right. So when I say something about someone else, trust me, I've said it about myself too. Right. Because I feel like all of these, you know, psychopathies, all of these problems that we have inside of anyone's brain is inside of all of our brains. Right. And we're all on a scale of all of these weird, fucked up things. Like, we all have parts of our brain that are exactly the same as everyone else, and therefore their fucked up parts are exactly the same as what could be in mine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I see what you mean. Yeah. Right? I mean, structurally, our brains are structurally all pretty much the same or very similar. So but then it's how much.
But for the grace of God, that could be me. That could be me having to wrap myself up in blankets because I can't deal with the electromagnetics of, right? Like, and that's where, you know, I laugh because that could be me. Right. And that's the absurd part about all of this, is that we shame those people for having those things while our things are just as fucked up.
Yeah.
Right. And just because we have these phobias and not those ones, right? Like that's been my thing with this is like you said, normalizing, but humanizing and making it so that it's all of us, right? Like it's not just me, it's not just you, it's all of us. We're all fucked up.
Yeah.
Right.
The ongoing premise for the show that we keep reinforcing all the time, that we're all messed up in some way.
Yeah. Well, this is why, again, we try to start with the therapy of it, right? Like how, like we recognize that because we all have the potential to have these breaks inside of our neural structure, right? And it could be even like, it could be part of what's built into your brain. You could have an accident. You could have an aneurysm that will cause your brain to misfire now. And now the things that you used to do are now different, right? And that's the problem with all of this, is that it's very easy for all of us to be them or that or whatever, right? And I think that we need to start getting past the idea of superiority because we were born without those kind of issues, okay? Because we could all have them. We're just, you know, on a different scale.
That's rather profound.
It's been a real thing for me because I used to have to kind of make excuses for people, right? I used to call it my monkey quest, where I would look for those people who are trying to be more than just the base monkey part of their brains, right? Like those who are trying to rise above and try to really look out into the world and see, like, okay, how do I get above this stuff inside these phobias and these fears that hold me down and hold everybody down? How do you get past this, right? And so you try to look for people who are really, you know, moving beyond that.
Right.
Right. And that's been kind of the real quest for me. And part of that was recognizing that, you know, they accept you for who you are, regardless of what's fucked up in here. It doesn't matter. Right. And figuring out that I could learn something from whatever this was, right, was a real step there. Right. That even the person that you think is the lowliest, you know, person out there still has something to teach you. And that simple point of view, really cutting through the bullshit, is really what a lot of us need sometimes to get, you know, out of these thought spaces.
Well, I think, understanding that ideas are really just individual perceptions, right? Absolutely. Like the way someone else thinks or acts, behaves is just a product of how they perceive the world versus how we do. Yeah. Right. At the end of the day, the stimuli is exactly the same. Right. It's just so therefore no one can be better. No one can be worse or dumber, smarter. All of these things, they don't actually exist.
Yeah. Just a different journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot
and
of...
that's where there's no superiority to any of it, right? Like if your journey is to be the dirtiest of the dirty, that's absolutely just as valid of an existence as being the cleanest of the clean, right? That's the thing, is that there's no real scale for you to say that existence shouldn't exist.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
I mean,
Regardless
whatever's
of how...
important to the individual.
Yeah.
Right. And I worked with schizophrenics many years ago for a long time. And a big part of kind of why I left working for organized agencies like that was because we were trying to convince them that their thinking was faulty. Right. And I always took the stance of, well, how do we know?
Yes, exactly.
Right. I mean, who am I to say that guy wasn't abducted by aliens and probed? Right. I don't know that. Right. Maybe he was. Right. Or people that hear voices. It's, we can't understand that. But who am I to say that that's not real for you?
It's yeah.
Right. And it's a bit of an extreme example, but I think on day-to-day kind of life, that's how it is. Right. When we're trying so hard to convince people to see it our way. Right. Well, that's just it. It's just our way. There's no general truth, absolute truth that everyone needs to follow.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, it's really hard work. It seems like an uphill battle to try to convince somebody or to buy into whatever it is that you're saying, right? Whether it's a religious belief, a political belief, doesn't matter. It's always an uphill battle to try to convince somebody.
And why do we need to convince them?
Yeah.
Right. That's the big question.
Why is that? Yeah. And that's been, that's the question of right or wrong, right? Like, are you right or are you wrong? Well, does it matter? Who gives a fuck? Right? Like, is it relevant to where we are right now that you're right or wrong? I mean, you might be wrong today and tomorrow you might be right. Who knows? Right? It's all kind of relative to where you are in your perspective of. So I think it's more just a matter of being, educated.
Yeah.
It's always kind of what we
thoughtful.
circle back to in this show, isn't it? It's not about being right or wrong, or, it's just about having the conversation, being open to listening to new ideas and discussing them, right? Who cares who's right?
Well,
I care.
And so now
When it's me, when we're talking about me,
that,
I always demand to be the right one.
having said that, let's circle to the very wrong, right? How do you get to the point of like you were talking about wasting time, or I guess not wasting time, but a lot of, that was me, but a lot of effort being put into convincing people. Okay. And how do you convince someone that they have been misled by their leader?
Well, I don't think you
open up a can of worms here.
Yeah.
Well,
this
then
is taking a turn.
that's where we'll not talk dates, but this can of worms has been opened, and I really feel that it's a conversation that us in Canada need to start having, because guess what? We're not immune to this kind of stuff, right? And I think that we need to start, and I think this is one of the issues also moving forward, is how do you talk to people that consider you evil, right? That's an issue that I've brought up before here on the show, and it's going to be one of these real thought processes that we're really going to have to get into here is if they are convinced that you're the devil and evil incarnate, how do you talk to that person? How do you get past that?
Do you have an answer for that, or are you just posing the question?
Well, I think that ties into phobias.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kristen? Is that kind of a fear-based issue that we're having here?
Okay, so
I think that's a bit of a
to make
stretch.
it nice and simple, right? This is just them being afraid of shit, right? Like,
I mean, perhaps, yeah. There was a lot of stuff you just threw at me there. I'm trying to narrow that down into.
Again, with these very simple conversations that we have on the show here, right?
Yeah.
But just, to talk about phobias, you know, like, is a lot of what we saw going on in the States there, is that due to, fear-based phobia mongering,
Well, I mean,
Well,
can you be more specific? What do you might as well point out the elephant in the room of what's going on. I know this episode's going to air much later on, but you might as well just say it if you're going to say it.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking about the aftermath of this for a while here. I'm sure
You're talking about the Capitol riot in Washington D.C.
Yeah, it's been one of those unfolding tragedies basically to watch here, and again, just kind of brings to mind the fact that, you know, we have deep divides in our own country that we need to start dealing with as well. And you know, how do we start bridging these divides is going to be one of the big questions that we're going to have here. So again, I'm just trying to figure out whether it's something that, you know, a phobia, you know, based kind of, what was it? Exposure therapy thing might be part of what we can use to hopefully move forward with some of these conversations, right? Like just trying to make it less of a, oh my God, they're coming for you. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And try to make it more of just like, hey, buddy, it's okay, right? Like they're not actually the devil, hey? I mean, like, right?
I think the more difficult thing when it comes to politics is it's more, it's fear for your own livelihood, right? It's fear for your very existence, which makes it a bit different than, you know, your phobia, fear of spiders, for example, right? Like, so I think it takes a lot more to kind of dig into that one because it's a very fundamental level of who am I and who are we as a society, right? So if that's
less
the fear mongering that's going
fear
on,
and actually an entirely motivated and justified fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it does make it a lot more difficult. It's not as easy as, you know, well, not that it's easy to help anyone with any phobias. They're all very valid.
It's not as easy as just take a little peanut butter and just stick it to your mouth. It's going to be fine, buddy. Don't worry about it.
That sounded terrible. That's obviously very difficult as well for, you know, if you have these fears. But it takes a lot more because it's actually requiring to break down your concept of self. Right. If you get into kind of political allegiance, there's a reason why you're identifying with certain people or certain parties. There's a reason why you are incited to go and riot for what you believe in, because something deep down in your fundamental makeup that makes you has been triggered.
Can you really fix stupid? Seriously, can you fix stupid?
Can you cure someone of conspiracy theory? Is that?
Well, it's a combination. All of this stuff. I mean, it's a confluence of many different things, but there's a serious, you know, you've got a serious problem in front of you when there are people that are trying to destroy democracy as it currently functions, right? And there are going to be, you know, people are going to forget about Trump, and you know, in a couple of years. Obviously, there's somebody replacing him, but we're just seeing people that have always existed, but I think social media, the internet at large, has given a platform to many different people who have varying different beliefs, and I just think there are people that are just dumb. There are people that are susceptible to misinformation. There are people that don't critically think about things. They don't look at the news source where they're getting their information. They don't understand who's writing that information and what's going on behind the scenes. People just don't fucking think, right? How do you fix that?
That's actually more the issue, right? Like, because what they found by studying it is that the people who really believe in these conspiracy theories aren't dumb by any stretch, right? A lot of them are scientists and right, like really accomplished people who you know, think very clearly in a lot of ways. But the problem is that they found that they're very good at pattern recognition. It might be part of what their work is, right? But because they can see the connection between this and this, it becomes very easy for them to make justification as for why that is, regardless of evidence or theory or proof or anything, right? And so that was kind of the issue, is that we're not dealing with stupid people. We're dealing with smart people, and dealing with them as if they're stupid isn't going to help us, right? That's the issue. We need to start getting past that thought process of, again, they're lesser than us because they've been led down this merry path by this stupid thing, right? These flat earthers who just believe this stupid bullshit that blah, 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 right? Like, well, again, the problem is that they're actually smart people who have been led down this path, and it's a matter of trying to deprogram this thing.
I think it's a product of too much information. Right. And kind of going back to what you're saying, Alex, is, there's now a platform for it. These people always existed. Right. But when we're just so overwhelmed constantly, we're saturated by information. Our brains can't take it in. So then it's what's called confirmation bias. Right.
Exactly.
Well, we're more likely to then pick out the information that is in alignment with our pre-existing beliefs. And then since there's so much of it, it's quite easy that any one of us can be convinced of anything at all. Right. And I don't think it necessarily makes you stupid. I think it just makes you human.
What do you do when you have a giant group of people in a country that really believe an election that just happened was illegitimate? That's a pretty tough problem to fix.
But again, like, smart people who have been led astray, right? They were fed a diet of a media that allowed this to happen.
They were lied to.
They were lied to repeatedly and with wild abandon. Like 50, they've kept account on the number of lies that he's told over his 4 years, and it's staggering. Just the nope, that's not true. 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 Like, just think about that. Just nope, and on just a ding, 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 like, just So that's the issue, is that if their reality is already full of this mind-bending gaslighting stuff, right? And whenever someone says, no, this is the truth, there's someone else going, no, it's not the truth, man. Right? Like Kristen was saying, it's very hard to filter that through, and then the biases start to kick in and you just ignore it all.
Well, when there's that much, we'll use air quotes for this, evidence that can back up anything, right? It's going to be very difficult to have someone question their beliefs when, you present what you think is your truth and you have evidence to back it up. And then they'll pull whatever their truth and evidence to back it up. And you both just go like this, right? Like, you just keep butting against each other.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to what we always try to do here is conversation, right? Being open to other opinions instead of let me show you you're wrong. It's let me just talk about what I think, right? And how I came to this conclusion, right? And if you break that down, you break down how I arrived here, based on this and this. And then the other person can break down this, right? You end up having an understanding for each other. So while you might not agree, at least you have a general understanding, and now you have a place to work, a place to start building from.
Now, first off, let me tell you how you're wrong. I was holding that. I was like, okay, just wait for it. Okay.
Why is it that we take such pleasure in proving to somebody else that they are wrong? Why does that make you feel so good? Because I'm guilty of that.
Because then we're part of the tribe.
We all are.
Let me just show you in all the ways that you're wrong. I'm so smart.
It's part of the tribe.
Is it?
But yeah, that's where, like, what they find with the flat Earth group is that a lot of it comes down to just being part of a group that and again, the more you defend that group from the outside, the more you're kind of invested in being here. Hey, and so if all of your friends, it's like leaving a tight-knit religious group, right? If your entire social structure is here, and this one thing is the thing that they all say, you can't believe that, or we won't, or you're going to have to leave the group. Right? It becomes tough for you to say things against it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of it's interesting. I like, Aaron, that you always go back to the hunter-gatherer thing and about the way human, like the current are the brains that we have. Although we've come a long way as a species, there's still so many aspects of the human brain that we don't understand, and so many like ancient aspects of the human brain that just haven't fundamentally changed. The fight or flight response, us versus them, all that stuff that you keep going back to. I think I find it very, very fascinating, and it'll be very interesting to see if we're still here in 5,000 years, whether or not we're going to be able to really move past a lot of those archaic aspects of our mind. Because I really feel like human beings we're a prisoner of our own mind in so many ways, right? We're so limited by just experiences, things that are maybe passed down from, parent to child. Going back to phobias, I mean, is that something that could be passed down through DNA? There's some evidence of that in as we examine the animal kingdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was actually a French study that showed that apparently phobias are actually passed down. They did a study on children who were too young to have been able to have memories formed of like the things that would cause phobias, right? And what they found is that these children, like if their parents were afraid of spiders, they would react to spiders. Right?
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with fears. If their parents were heights, if their parents were afraid of heights, if you held this child over any kind of, they would go, oh my God, right? Whereas the kids whose parents didn't have those fears didn't tend to exhibit those same kind of phobias or phobic responses. So yeah, it was an interest. I haven't read anything past that to see whether they had, proven it or gone any studies past it. But yeah, it was quite interesting to see that it might actually, because there's a lot of like the old shamans talk about, the ancestral spirits that you can kind of go into the spirit world and commune with, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea that we're still tied to these spirits around us and everything is old and probably from our very first existence. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much we don't know about the human brain,
of course,
and how it functions, right? Mm-hmm. And things like that, like how a thought or a phobia could potentially be integrated in DNA to be passed down. Like that's crazy, right? I personally believe that could be a thing, right? But then that opens up the door to so many other things, right? So in terms of energy, like you're saying, right? If something like that is possible, then why isn't it possible that, past ancestors are influencing us as well? I mean, it could be. Anything's possible. We know so little about how we actually function.
Mm-hmm.
Where does
energy never disappears? It just changes shape. Mm-hmm. That's all it is, right? We never actually lose energy. We never actually, like our whole lives, we're using energy, but all we're doing is just converting it into a different form. Mm-hmm. Right? So the idea that what animates us here just disappears. Right? They just figured out that birds might have consciousness because we didn't understand their brain structure well enough to be able to say, oh, that's where their consciousness is. So we just assumed they didn't have it. That's how like narrow-minded that we've been dealing with everything around us, let alone everything inside of us for all these years, right? Like we had hundreds of years of dark ages that we're still fighting our way out of, right? Because a lot of these religious groups that were around then are still here doing their thing. Right?
Yeah.
So I hold out hope that we will be here in 5,000 years.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
So where does one go for help if they have a phobia? You talked about, Kristen, earlier about behavioral therapy. I'm not sure if that was the exact term you used, but where do you go for help? Like who do you need to talk to?
It depends on your level, obviously, of phobia and how much it's impacting your life. So if it's something that's negatively impacting it, then, clearly seek some help, talk to somebody. Hopefully just friends, family can even help with it. But if it's something severe, then, find a counselor, a therapist, try to kind of break it down, get to the root of what's going on. But it is perfectly normal, right? Mm-hmm. We all have them. We all just discussed, we all have very harmless kind of phobias. But yeah, if it's really affecting your daily functioning, then absolutely talk it out, right? We can all kind of get past things with just switching how we perceive them, right? And for some, it's going to take maybe a lengthy therapy. For others, it might just be, sometimes you just hear a perception shift from someone else, and that's it. But just start by talking about it. There's absolutely no shame in it.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Well, the problem too is, especially if you know somebody, if you have a friend that's troubled, sometimes they're not, I mean, first of all, some people are very private. They're not necessarily willing to always discuss what is actually troubling them. Obviously, there are signs. But yeah, you're right. If depending on the severity of the problem, if you can't function at work or you don't want to get out of bed in the morning because you're worried about something that you've got these things weighing on you, yeah, that's obviously a problem. You should go get help of some kind.
Yeah,
I've got many phobias about my dick. I don't always talk about them, though. Sorry, just had to throw that in there.
That's a perfect example.
relevant.
Thank you very much for adding that. It adds a lot of value.
Always end with Aaron talking about his dick.
Well, it's like Alex said, I like to break it down to the simple and simple.
All right. Well, any other closing thoughts before we wrap?
Your brain's fucked. Your brain's fucked. Your brain's fucked.
Cool.
Your brain's fucked.
All right, so
Your
we're all
brain's
fucked.
Your brain's fucked.
All right.
All right.
And if you have a phobia, I would like to hear about it. I think all three of us would like to hear what your phobia is.
The weird and wonderful ones. Those are right. Like the weirder the better.
The weirder the better. I mean, I shared my earwax thing. I mean, why not? I'm sure there are plenty of stranger phobias.
Spiders is, I suppose. Pretty lame one.
Yeah, jump down to the comments to let us know your thoughts on that. If you are watching on YouTube, thank you very much. Hit subscribe to make sure you get every new episode each and every week. And if you prefer audio versions, you can't sit down and watch video for an hour, you can find The Subvert in any podcast player of choice: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, and Stitcher, and Google as well. We're pretty much everywhere. We're on social media at The Subvert Pod on Twitter and Facebook. You can send us feedback the old-fashioned way via email to thesubvert@hologramradio.org. Hopefully I got that email address right. Or just go to hologramradio.org/contact. And you can reach us there as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this week. We'll see you next time.